Thank you, Andy, for visiting probably the oldest, if not one of the oldest, if not one of the oldest Gurdwaras in the country. And as Sikhs, it's important that we continue to play a role in the society that we live in. And this is one opportunity for us to continue to do so. You will know Andy Street is our Metro Mayor. He covers an area which is the Black Country, Coventry, and the Greater Birmingham area. And back in the winter of last year, Andy held an all-faith conference at the University of Birmingham, which Jatinder and Humej, I think, attended on behalf of this Gurdwara. 4 themes emerged, which became the pillars of the plan. You have a copy with you here. So the 4 themes are in here, and they've now been worked on over the last 5 months. So the 4 themes are lack of faith representation in leadership roles, hate crime, homelessness, and faith as an economic asset. So the purpose of today then is to launch the Mayor's Faith Action Plan across 4 communities, and Andy will tell us which those communities are, in the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is the responsibility for Andy here. So this is the second venue for this launch. Now, what we hope to do at the end of this, so the outcome, is Andy is keen to understand what the Sikh perspective is for these 4 areas, and I've just spoken about them. Not just the challenges and the problems, but the solutions that we as a community can contribute to support faith. So today, this is the format. We'll hear from various speakers who will seek to look at those 4 issues. We will start with a presentation from Jatinder, who's the president of this brilliant Gurdwara. He'll be followed by, I think she's running late, Preet Gill. After Preet Gill, we will hear from the Mayor. Then we will spend about 20-25 minutes talking about those 4 categories, and 4 people amongst us will lead the discussion. Once they've stopped speaking, you then have an opportunity to ask questions about that topic. Once we've done that, then I think we bring the whole thing to a close. Now, I must tell you, we are looking to finish at 1:05. So I don't want any long speeches. Get to the point. And if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. I will ask you to speak. You'll say your name, and then you'll ask your question. Can I just suggest that the questions should be around those 4 topic areas? If there's anything outside of that, we can always ask Andy to come back later.
So I'll begin the session with the Sikh greeting, in which we offer all of our victories to the Almighty. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. On behalf of Guru Nanak Gurdwara's congregation, trustees and management committee, I'd like to welcome Andy Street, his team, and everyone else to Guru Nanak Gurdwara Smethwick. Guru Nanak Gurdwara is one of the largest Sikh places of worship in Europe and holds one of the largest congregations as well. It is a prominent Gurdwara which was established. The congregation came together in 1958, and then this building was purchased in 1961. From then on, the Gurdwara has grew in its size and its community. The Gurdwara has played a major role within the local area, not just in Sandwell, probably nationally as well, and has quite an influence over the community. What we're really proud of is originally that this site was a church before it was established as a Gurdwara. That church was built in 1837, and from 1837 to 2018, we've got 150 years or over 150 years of meditation of God's name in maybe a different form, but meditation upon God's name, and this is a hallowed site. That's something that we're proud of. The Sikh community has enshrined the message of our gurus not only into the West Midlands, but from here has spread into all over the UK, as it was one of the first Gurdwaras in the United Kingdom. The British Sikh community has made and continues to make a huge contribution to the nation. The Gurdwara is a key part of the British Sikh heritage. It is a hallowed and landmark site which provides tranquility and guidance to all walks of life. So the Gurdwara also provides free langar, free food, as well as the other Gurdwaras. But we have an approximate or estimated a congregation of 10,000 people coming through the doors per week. And touching upon the heritage, we were recently listed as one of the top 10 sites by Historic England for faith. And you know, this is something that the Sikh community, both who are linked to the Gurdwara and the wider Sikh community, you know, around the world, are very proud of. Touching upon one of the 4 points which are to be discussed today, Guru Nanak Gurdwara is also proud to be a reporting centre for hate crime. So in 2016, we signed up to be a reporting centre for hate crime. So this is something that we're proud of as well, and we're working hand in hand with the local authorities and with West Midlands Police to ensure that any issues are reported and do get addressed as soon as possible. So on that note, I'll pass it back to Ninder, and thank you everyone for your time. I hope you enjoyed the food, and I hope everyone enjoys their time here today. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
So, Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting us here today and for allowing the Guru Nanak Gurdwara to host the launch of this report. Can I also thank you on behalf of all of my colleagues and other guests for the languor that you've shared with us, and indeed for the honour that you showed me in the Durbar downstairs a little earlier on. So thank you very much for the hospitality that you've shown us. It's also brilliant to be back here because, as you will know, I've been here a number of times before and enjoyed it every time, seeing the teaching that you're doing here and, of course, seeing the enormous contribution you make to the local community. So thank you for everything you do. So when I was elected last May, I think it would be agreed that my key priorities were the practical issues around jobs, transport, housing and skills. And I hope people feel that a year on, we're getting on and we're dealing with the delivery of jobs just as we said we would. But today's not about that. Today is about what I would describe as the overriding ambition. The real purpose of all the work around those practical things is to restore pride in the West Midlands and to be able to say that everyone in the West Midlands is sharing in the success that the new economic revival is bringing about, and particularly that some of the communities that have not shared in that success in the past are now enjoying a much more inclusive role. That's really what's at stake. And I was very conscious right since last May that the faith communities have a really essential role in ensuring that success is shared amongst everybody. And it was for that reason that very shortly after becoming mayor, I established the steering group which led to the faith conference. 17 members of the steering group from many faiths across the West Midlands, and I'm delighted that Asha, for example, from Coventry, is here as one of the representatives of that steering group. It was that group that put together the conference in November, as Ninder said, and that group also called out the 4 priority areas that are focused on in the report. They weren't the ones I decided upon, they were the ones that the group came up with together. And I will admit I was a little surprised by 1 or 2, but it was a decision that the group must take, and those are the priority areas that we've been working on then: the economy, homelessness, leadership and hate crime. And what happened at the conference is there was really brilliant conversation led by some distinguished members of the community here, like the Bishop, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and out of that conversation and the months that have gone afterwards came the plan that we are launching today. I hope you feel when you read it that the plan is practical. It's building on everything that communities already do themselves, and it's also building on the work that each individual local authority does itself. We want the work that the combined authority and the mayor brings to be additive, to bring everyone together, not to just duplicate what already goes on extremely well in individual areas. The headline commitments, just to pull a few of them out, because you can read yourself all the recommendations, but some things that I think are very important. I took absolutely the requirement that people of faith should take a leading role in all of our main work, and particularly in the task forces that we're setting up on individual issues. We want to celebrate those people who've been the best exemplars of interfaith work, and we talk in the report about new prizes, showcasing, new awards is a better word, showcasing the very best of the work that goes on. We talked about leadership and aspiration for young people, and one of the most exciting things, I think, in the report is new leadership development provided by our universities to help people in the faith communities move into broader leadership roles. And then we talk about a number of specific things in the report, ensuring that the great work that's done by some of the faith organisations, particularly I have to say the Sikh organisations, can be reflected in our overall approach to homelessness, because you do really show a very, very leading community spirit there. And then we've talked about a new work stream which we want to work with the Police and Crime Commissioner on around hate crime, and particularly, given my responsibility for transport, hate crime on the transport system, which is a problem in the West Midlands. And we don't yet know the cause of it, but we should, of course, just reflect on the dreadful events in Sutton Coldfield on Thursday. But the overall picture, which I hope the report supports, is that what's become really clear to me in the last 12 months is that each of the communities has its own values, but actually there's a huge common set of values. And they are about tolerance, inclusivity, respect for other communities. And I'm a fervent believer that if we can get everyone to understand more about respective communities, that is the way in which you build a genuinely tolerant society, one in which I know everyone in this room believes in, and we could then be very proud to say the West Midlands has become that tolerant, inclusive community. So thank you for everyone who's done the work to get to this point. Once again, thank you for hosting us today, and I very much look forward to working on this together as we go forward, because it is, as we say, the beginning, not the end of the journey. Thank you very much indeed. Let
me start by the Sikh greeting. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So the action plan highlights 3 areas to take forward. First being roll out the Mayor's Mentor programme within the faith groups, work with universities to create a leadership programme for young and emerging leaders. And the third is to contribute to the findings and action plan of the Leadership Commission, examining the reasons for there being a lack of Sikh and BAME representation across the region. So if I can start off with some stats, women make up 52% of the UK population, yet only 16% of directors on UK boards are female, and only 7 of the FTSE 100 CEOs are female. The BAME community make up 14% of the UK population, yet there's only 2% BAME leaders on UK boards. If we bring that a little bit closer to home, the Birmingham Post recently ran a Power 250 list. Only 17 powerful people were from the Asian community, one of them being our very own Mr. Johal. 7 were Sikh, and there was only 1 Sikh woman, and that was Anita Bala. So I think that reflects the issue that we've got in hand, and what's important is the why. Why is that? So we often talk about there being a lack of confidence, lack of role models, and a lack of networks for individuals to grow their exposure and their profiles as well. But I think there's something else that happens here. There's the blockers as well. The unconscious bias, the passive aggressive behaviour, and the subliminal conditioning that we have as Sikh women had, not just Sikh women, but as Asian women we've had, where even if we look at the Gurdwaras, what has traditionally been the place for Sikh women? And it has been, sadly, in the kitchen. So it's about sometimes just reflecting on some of those conditioning that we've had as individuals through that. In the wider world, there is the Old Boys Network. It is, if I look at the corporate world, it is very, sorry Andy, white male and pale at the top. So these are the same challenges. So I think it's about looking at how do we overcome these unconscious biases, this subliminal conditioning, to actually come up with solutions going forward. I talked about the lack of role models. Linda, you carry out 3 award ceremonies every year, and within that, I'm sure we can highlight role models from the BAME community and the Sikh community as well, who we can then take forward and give them those opportunities to become leaders of the future. The lack of confidence, I think it's quite interesting, this lack of confidence, and I hear it a lot, being an Asian woman in the corporate world. I think for someone to understand how we have been conditioned, you have to be from the Asian community sometimes. So all the cultural barriers, as well as all the personal and professional ones, do actually make us sometimes lack that confidence. So it's important to have mentors, to have sponsors, that encouragement from the community. And the Gurdwara here is a huge ambassador for female talent and actually speaking up on these issues as well. But most importantly, I think it's about creating those opportunities. So Andy, whenever across all your work, when there is an opportunity, reach out to the Sikh community so we can actually find individuals who can support you with those projects, because in turn that will help us create those leaders, because it's all about developing that competency to then be able to get that next job and that leadership. Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Said is spot on, the things you're raising, and that's, I think we can all raise those in all our place of work as well. I think one thing for our females, our Benjahana, is I don't think you need to ask to come forward, right? I think sometimes I think females are waiting for the males to actually say, actually, we accept you could come forward now. You don't need to do that. Guru Sahib has given you that right in the first place, right? So I think it's where I think our sisters need to come forward and be a bit more bold enough, and you need to look at how, you know, if it's not working in the Guru Cards, if the Guru Cards aren't accepting you, there's plenty you could do outside the Guru Card. Right, so this thing about acceptance shouldn't be there, right? Because you've been given equal rights in the first place, right? And I think in regards to why aren't people moving up in the workplace? I think there needs to be a system to escalate in general, because at times at work people don't feel that they can escalate because there's a cut-off point, and sometimes you might have the person right at the top who's saying yes, we want equality and we want people to move up. It's the middle layer that are the blocks. Right, and I see that myself. So it's a case where I think if there was something external where someone outside can hold people accountable, if there's to build that strength outside, and it's recognised, and so there's a place to go to, because at the moment sometimes you can't approach your supervisors, right, and you can't generally go to the top as well.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this extremely important topic, which is actually dear to my heart. As a GP, I've held a contract. I'm one of a handful of GPs who've had a contract to look after the homeless since about 2012, and 2 other areas that are linked are mental health and substance abuse. I have been working very closely with several charities, and over the last 3 or 4 years, I've picked up some common themes across these charities. I'd like to just go through those and then look at some of the issues and solutions. Now, looking after the homeless is not exclusive to Sikhism. Most major religions have a common desire to help the less fortunate, except within Sikhism, it's taken a step further. Langar, a free kitchen, is embedded in every temple, and anyone is free to partake in that. Plus, most of the congregation have this desire to help, selfless service called seva. And if we use these 2 assets, langar and seva, in the community, you can actually do huge things. Now, Sikhs make up less than 1% of the population, but the one thing you will now see up and down the country is how langar has escalated into being the largest provider of free food, past even the food banks. And I think that's a huge achievement from such a small group of very committed people. Now, Christian charities are also heavily involved, and the one thing that they have is they've been established for much longer. They tend to have a very large structural base with buildings from which you can do more than just provide street feeds. And this is the one area that our Sikh charities lack, and I'd like to go into in a little bit of depth. There are locally many Sikh charities, and most are donation-based, and they have a regular call to the community for donations, and there's plenty of food being donated. So the amount of food is not a problem. There are enough people to give out the food. But unfortunately, these charities are not that novel. They all basically have the same strategy of street feeds, which are not always targeted. I'm not being critical, I'm trying to be constructive here. They tend not to be targeted. There's a lot of food, and it's often all given out, and often to anyone who's hungry. So it isn't particularly just for the homeless. I've seen quite wealthy individuals stand in a queue for a free drink, and therefore it's quite difficult to measure your impact on the homeless and the less vulnerable, because you're taking a huge hungry crowd, and sometimes I'm hungry and I'll get a bottle of water as well. The charities are driven by highly driven individuals, and there's a growing number of these charities. Some have formal contract funding, but that's really an exception rather than the rule. So for me, that's a missed opportunity. I see charities need to develop good governance and start working in a more formal way and actually start bidding for the local authority monies. And I've been helping a local charity, Midlands Langar Seva Society, for the last 3 years to embed corporate governance, something that I know is dear to your heart, Andy. And you know that without corporate governance, you cannot run or have a growing organisation. You pretty well stand still and don't make much more of a difference. So there's a charity that's really trying hard and desperately to take on corporate governance. But another thing creeping in between our Sikh charities is, unfortunately, a prevailing mood of competition rather than collaboration. And this is unfortunately human weakness, and each charity is trying to build up their own empire and their own name, and I particularly find that difficult to overcome. So one of the things I will be suggesting is getting these together, and I'm quite happy to look at that. I know most of the leads in the organisations. I'm not affiliated, so I could probably make a move on that. And I think that's one of the ways we can integrate and develop synergies. So coming to very quickly some of the issues. We know there's a rising demand of the homeless and low-income groups. We know that planning for these groups is very difficult because official statistics don't really present a complete picture of the homeless. Therefore, you can't really plan properly for the homeless. You don't know which entity you're actually planning for. So solutions. Firstly, we need to improve the leadership of these organisations, which links to the first talker, and stop them working less in silo, but actually working together. So I have a simple concept, which I think this Gurdwara, being one of the most trusted and credible Gurdwaras in the UK, could probably support and coordinate, and that would be having an umbrella organisation of all the Sikh charities. Something could be called United Seva, could be called whatever we feel, but it would work towards common aims and focusing on impact and outcomes, because that is one area that our Sikh charities and other charities cannot show. Do they actually have a lasting impact on homeless? Do they actually make any difference to the outcomes? Because that is very rarely measured, and all we have are, there are so many homeless, so many deaths, that's all you see. The second is wider collaboration between the statutory and the voluntary sector, so local authority, third sector, existing charities. MLSS, as an example, did try and work with SIFA, a Birmingham-based charity, but for varying tensions and fear of takeover and loss of business, it didn't happen. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Looking at Andy's report, one of the things his objectives is to unlock the new economic and social value. And what the report also identified that there was, for being polite, economically illiterate leadership in some of the faiths. Okay, and I do agree with you. Both agree, and I fully endorse that. So I'll try to understand. We get a lot of news reports saying how well the Sikhs are doing, how fantastic they were. What is the reason for doing that. If you look at the Sikh scriptures, it talks about social mobility. Okay? My dad couldn't read and write. He said to me, education is the way out of poverty. Okay? I ended up doing a PhD. Social mobility is in the DNA. Literacy as well, right? That's in the scriptures. Family life in the scriptures. All those help both with the cohesion, but also success. Okay? There is a downside to the education bit. So the gurus did encourage social mobility. That's in the scriptures. But the other Sikh philosophy recognizes the humans need to live, love, and learn, and leave a legacy. You can understand why the success has been built, and majority of the Sikhs who were in the working classes in the 50s and 60s arrived here are middle class, and I'm proud to say that. My daughters hate me using that phrase, but I'm afraid economically that's where the Sikhs have arrived. The langar has actually a very deep meaning. It's not just sharing food, it's sharing wealth, okay? It's not just saying, I'll feed a few people. It's that in the DNA again. We want to share because we are successful as an individuals, and we want to give something back to the communities, to the society, okay? So the scriptures again encourages investment, encourages employment and generation of self-employment. That is very, very important, okay? And again, it's all, the culture and the scriptures are inseparable, and it's in there. And lots of, I worked for the MOD for a long time, and my CEO used to say, what is it about the Sikhs? I said, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA. We've grown up to be entrepreneurs. And you can understand, relate back to the scriptures which we hear. Success, we all know, I won't repeat, what I will repeat, two things, is that there are 70,000 directors with the name Singh on Companies House. Unfortunately, only 24,000 with a core in their name. So we need to raise that game. Here I'm going to criticize as well, controversial. The Gurdwara committees are underrepresented by women. Let's start here. Let's have equal representation. Okay, it's 350 years old is the equality. Let's show by leadership here. That's the other thing. I won't quote all the numbers, but if you look at it, there's £1 billion turnover, two sisters, 380 million of the. KTC is 280 million citizens. Now, I think leadership is important, and I think this all connects back to it. And I think the Pravanda committee, the Gurdwara committee should reach out to people who've got fantastically resource experience and bring them in, okay? On that basis, Andy, I have only one recommendation, and I'm going to coin a phrase which we used before. I'd like to set up a Sikh Dragon's Apprentice. It's not Dragon's Den, it's not the apprentice, but it's a combination of two. And I'd be very happy if anybody wants to work. I can pull in through you, Andy. Let's start setting that, and let's get the new entrepreneurs. And the other thing, I urge everybody who's got the experience. I sit as a non-executive director on 7 companies, and I do not get paid for it because I want to help startup companies to achieve something. Okay, and to me, that's a seva I give. Actually, they're not all Sikh, by the way, but it's me putting that in. So that's the final thing. I'd like to work with you, Dragon's Apprentice. You heard this word here. That's what we should do. Thank you.
It's an issue that goes to my heart, and I know it is an issue that a lot of the community here will care about. When we think of the steps that we've taken as a Sikh community to educate people and to make it possible for the turban, for instance, as a very important identifier within our Sikh faith, to be respected and indeed recognised within law. Those measures, those movements started here in the West Midlands, in places like Handsworth, in places like Smethwick. And in 1983, the law was changed and recognised the Sikh turban as a very important part of Sikh identity, which needs to be protected. Since then, post 9/11 and 7/7 in particular, Sikhs have seen a a rise in hate crimes against them because of their identifiers of their faith, whether it be their turban or whether it be their beard. And there are various issues at stake there and reasons why that is the case. So one of the things I certainly have worked on with the Turbanology project is raising awareness about Sikh turban identity and why it's important, but also how it should be protected. One of the key statistics for me, which really very much sums up the issue of hate crimes against Sikhs, is the fact that in 2016, the UK Sikh survey found that more than 100,000 Sikhs had been victims of hate crimes, and that was Sikh male and females over the age of 16. So clearly there is still an ongoing issue here, despite all the steps that have been taken to raise awareness and educate people about the Sikh turban and Sikh identifiers of faith. There is still an ongoing issue. To move forward to what can be done about this, certainly post-Brexit we've seen a rise in xenophobic attitudes and behaviours, contributing to the rise in hate crime, and certainly the Sikh community feel that we've often been overlooked, whether statistically we're not recognised in regional or national surveys for this. Certainly we don't see enough attention in the media about when we have got attacks or race hate crimes against Sikhs, and we need to do more about that. Now, within the community, the Sikh Network and the Sikh Council have done a fantastic job and have created something called Sikh Aware, whereby individuals who have been victimised or the victims of such hate crime can report it. One of the suggestions I would put forward is that we need to tie that in much better through your office as well as with the Crime Commissioner to ensure that we are able to recognise that this is an issue regionally and more needs to be done to raise awareness and indeed to educate people about Sikh identity. Not just the turban and the beard, which I mentioned, very relevant for men in particular, the turban of course relevant for some women, but also over the 5Ks and recognition and awareness about why the 5Ks are so important for the Sikh community and what can be done to ensure within the wider community in the Midlands that those articles of faith are protected. So I'll stop there and hand back to Ninda.
Right, time is pressing, but if I can give Andy a couple of minutes to sum up what you glean from this.
So what I glean is that the values that I talked about have actually been represented in each of the 4 contributions. So thank you to the 4 people who put them forward. And I think what I've been struck by is the way actions, Sukhdev, if I may put it this way, I think you brought this home to me clearest of all, you've extended the real depth of thinking about how those values can address some of these underlying issues. So I think what I take away from today is, as I said, it's the beginning, not the end of the journey. And through Mira, we will be working on these ideas with you. We'll want to continue to draw you into that. But I think actually it's been, Ninda, a very efficient use of time, if I may put it that way, for some very practical but very deep-rooted, principled ideas to come out. So thank you all, the 4 of you, for what you have put on the table. Thank you very much. And once again, Mr. President, thank you very much for hosting us here. And I should have answered your prompt earlier on, Ninda. We're having 3 other locations for these discussions, with the Muslim community in Birmingham, with the Christian community in Wolverhampton, where we're going next, and with the Hindu community in Walsall. So we're trying very much to take different inputs as we put the total picture together. So thank you.
We had a suggestion about external bodies looking at the way ladies and particularly Asians and Sikhs are promoted. We talked about a Sikh school. We talked about linking Langar and Seva and extending it. We talked about better targeting of people who need Langar and Seva rather than giving it to those people probably from middle class. So Andy, you can help with that. You can help with linking charities, with bidding for projects, making the link between private, public sector for us. We talked about problems with turbans. I travel extensively. I have problems at airports. If we could talk to your transport secretary to elevate amongst the airports around in Europe, the further east you go, East Europe, the worse trouble the turban becomes. So if you could help us in getting that message across, particularly in the EU, I think there's problems with census being identified every 10 years, how many Sikhs live here, and those kind of things. That would help the education side. I think I'd like to now thank the President, the Gurdwara, for hosting us, Andy for you coming, for the 4 speakers who spoke so brilliantly, and obviously to everybody else here. And before we close, there are topics that we haven't had the chance to discuss today, which are probably to do with Sikhs and the Gurdwara and Smethwick and Sandwa, and hopefully at some point in the future you return to answer those questions. So I'd like to thank you all for attending. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.